Hello, and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Channel by Ninox Corporation. My name is Andy. I'll be your trainer today. And in this class, we're going to look at how we can use hidden tables, specifically hidden child tables, to be the data source for dashboards. We're going to look at how to use embedded views, and we're going to look at how we can access data globally when it's really designed to be record specific. If you'd like to follow along, the template that I'll be using and you'll be seeing in this class today is available at the Nioxus member portal. You can log in at www.nioxus.com, log into the standard, deluxe, or premier member portal, and download the template Child Tables and Views. The template is unlocked so you can see all the code, and you can use this in your own system if you like. Let's go ahead and begin. Now first, let's understand what it is we're dealing with. Here is a very standard invoicing system. We have tables for invoices, customers, inventory, and then a dashboard where we want to look at all of our sales activity. However, there is another table. If we go into administrative mode and look at our data model, we see that there is a child table named line items, which is a child to invoices in this invoice stack. And in looking at this table, we see that it is a hidden table. This is also indicated with the hidden tag right here. Now note that the table does appear when we are in administrative mode, but when we go into user mode, as a hidden table, it of course disappears. There's one more thing about this child table, and that is when we look at data in the child table, specifically the invoice line item table, we are only seeing it for the invoice that we are viewing at that time. So if we're looking at invoice 1021, we see the line items for invoice 1021. We go to a different invoice, we see different line items. But what happens if we want to interrogate all of the line items for all of the invoices? Well, we can't access the line item table directly because it's a hidden child. And we can't see all of the line items on one screen at one time because as a child table, we only see the children of that one parent, in this case, the invoice, that is on screen at a particular moment in time. Before we go any further, let me explain why this is a hidden table. Consider the line items table itself, which has a data entry screen that looks like this. When entering an invoice, the standard operating procedure is to define, and I'll bring up a new invoice, the invoice number, the date, the customer who's buying the products, and then the line items. But we access the line items by going through the parent table. It is not customary to enter line items directly into the child table and then retroactively create a parent. And remember, one of the fundamental rules of a child table is that the parent must precede the child in existence. The parent must exist before the child can exist. Therefore, we have hidden the child table to prevent data entry directly into that table, thereby ensuring that every child already has a parent in existence when it's created. We create the invoice, then we create the line item, the children. But by hiding this table and making it a child, we make it very difficult, in fact nearly impossible, to interrogate all of our sales on an item-by-item basis, because the items are not tracked in the one visible table, which is the invoice table. We can see how many line items there are per invoice, but we can only see the details of those line items by going in and actually looking at the record in the line items child table. So what do we do in this situation? we use a view. Now this fourth table that we've set up, this dashboard table, is where we use the view to interrogate all of the line items irrespective of their parent. This is the one way that we can access all of the content in a hidden child table without the restrictions of only seeing one parent's children. So let's look at this dashboard. We are using 4 parameters to define what we see in the dashboard. Now, the first set of parameters might allow us to look at a specific period of time. And here I will look at the month of June. Here are all of our sales for the month of June. I can narrow this down to a particular customer in the month of June. I can even narrow this down to a particular product in the month of June. Maybe I want to see all of our product sales for all customers in the month of June. I can simply delete the customer parameter, and here are all of the products we have sold. If I want to see everyone that has purchased apples from the 1st of June through the end of August, I can do it this way. And here we see all of our apple sales to all of our customers for all months June, July, and August. All of this data, whether it's date specific or customer or inventory specific or a combination of any of these 4 parameters, all of this content is coming out of the invoice line item table. Again, we select a view, and this time I'll do June 1st through the end of August, all customers, all products, and here are all of the invoice line items. Notice the invoices are duplicated. We had 3 line items in invoice 1001, apples, oranges, and cherries. We had 4 line items for invoice 1005, and here we see all of those 4 line items. Note that if we click here, it takes us to the line item detail. And from here, we can move up to the parent record to see the invoice. But how did we bring all of these line items out of a hidden table without the restriction of identifying a parent? We did it using a view. Views are created by going to the Layout Element option at the bottom of the screen in administrative mode when we are in Form View, or if you are in Table View, you can go under Add Layout Element and drag a view over just like that. I'm going to go back to doing this in Form View. Of course, you must be in administrative mode. You select Layout Element, you select View, and this places this window right on the screen. Now I'm going to clear out all the parameters so we can just work on this new view. This new view is a window into any table in this database. And the way we define what we see through this window is by going into the tools or going into the parameters for this view and defining a very simple formula. The keyword select and the name of the table. The fact that the line item table is hidden is irrelevant when creating a view. And here we see all 55 line items from every single parent invoice in our system. To define specifically what we want to see in the window, again, into the parameters or the tools for this view, and we click Edit Columns. We might want to see the item description, the quantity, the unit price, the line price, and we also want to see the name of the customer and the invoice. The invoice number is right there. I'll put that as the first field. And the customer is linked to the invoice. You will notice that in the available columns for the view object, you only see the first level relations. The invoice line item table is linked to the invoice table. We don't see the link from invoice back to customer, so we would have to represent that as a formula. I'll drag a formula over. I will name this formula the customer column, and the formula will be equal to the name of the customer as it appears in the customer table for the record that is linked to the invoice table. This is what we call the path. From the invoice line item, we go to the invoice, from the invoice to the customer table, and from the customer table to the customer name field. And that will give us a window into the hidden table that is the invoice line items table. We have content from 3 tables. The last 3 columns come right out of the invoice line item table. Item description, that comes out of the inventory table. Invoice number and customer, those come out of the parent table, the invoice header itself, the parent to the line item children. But since we are doing this in a view, we can see all line items. We don't have to select a parent and then be limited only to that parent. Now here we see a view, and we can name this view, and I'll go ahead and name it all records in the table. This is all records because we are not using any of the parameters, the date range, the customer, or the inventory, to include or exclude, to filter in or out certain records within the table. All we're saying is we want to see all 55 line items in the invoice line item table. So how did we get it to work when we established parameters? I'm going to go ahead and delete this view and show you what we did. There are, in fact, 4 views that are available in this dashboard. We have set this up using the visibility, invisibility parameter, display only when parameter, to show only one of those 4 views at a time, and the view that we see is based on the parameters that are specified. If I specify a beginning and ending date parameter, and let's specify a date range of June 1 through June 30, we see the dashboard details view. This view, named dashboard details, again begins with the select function and the name of the table we're selecting. In this case, obviously, invoice line items. But then the where clause introduces a couple of filters. Where the date of the parent invoice to these line items is greater than or equal to the variable xBegin or BEG, and that same field, the invoice date, is less than or equal to variable xEND or end. xBEG contains the value of the begin date, xEND contains the value of the end date, and this where clause establishes a filter that says if the date on the parent invoice record to this line item is not equal to or between the beginning and ending dates that define the range, do not include it in this selection. Therefore, do not let it be visible in the view. One other thing that we had to do, and that's under more options, we specified that this view is visible when the beginning and ending date are not null, but the customer and inventory fields are. We've only specified a beginning and ending date range. We have not specified a customer or an inventory parameter. And when those 2 parameters, beginning and ending date, are specified, but the last 2 parameters, custom and inventory, are not, we see this particular view. What happens when we add a parameter? If we add the customer parameter, and and I will select a customer, we now see the customer ledger. Exact same columns in exactly the same position, but with a slightly different formula. Again, it begins by selecting records from the table line items, and there is a where clause to indicate we're filtering. We are again filtering on date. The date of the invoice for this line item must be on or after the beginning of the range, or on or before, actually it would be an and. On or after the beginning date, and at the same time on or before the ending date. But then there's another and that specifies the customer must be equal to the customer selected in the customer parameter field. And the customer selected in that field is now being stored in the XCST variable. We see here that this particular window, this view, is visible when the customer parameter is not null, which is to say we have defined a customer parameter, but we have not defined an inventory parameter. If we flipped it, no customer, but we specify an inventory item for the same date range. Now we see the item ledger. Different view, exact same content, but this is only visible when the customer parameter is blank and the inventory parameter is not. And as you would expect, the formula is ever so slightly different. We select line items where the invoice date falls within the date parameters, the beginning and ending date, and a specific item in inventory has been defined. Now, what happens when we have identified both an inventory item and a customer to go along with the date range? Well, now we see this fourth view. This view is available when both the customer parameter and the inventory parameter are not null, which is to say we have provided values in both of these parameter fields. The beginning and ending date is mandatory. All four views require us to define a period of time that we wish to look at. The customer, the inventory parameters, those are optional. We can select one, the other, or both. Hence, four different views. One for when neither parameter is selected, one when we've selected a customer but not an inventory, one when we have selected an inventory but not a customer, and a fourth view when we have defined both. The system then understands which view, which window into that hidden line item table it should display, but since every window displays the exact same columns, we're seeing everything we need to see every time. And the last thing you see is the clear button, which when clicked simply resets all of our four parameters back to a null condition. So here we can easily clear out the parameters and start over again. So in this table structure, we have the beginning and ending date parameters and links to the customer and inventory table. These links allow us to pick a single customer and or single inventory item. We then have our four windows. That is how we can get around the fact that invisible tables are not immediately available to view, and child tables are only viewable according to which parent we're looking at a particular point in time. Using this view, this window into another table, and remember the view formula always begins with select and the table name. Using this view, this window into the table, allows us to get around the fact it's invisible on our sidebar, and allows us to get around the fact that you have to specify a parent to look at the children. Here, we can look at all children for all parents without a particular parent parameter. If you want to look at the line items for a specific invoice, well, we don't need to do that on our dashboard. We can just go right to the invoice table, select an invoice, and all of the line items for that invoice appear right here in the lower part of the screen. And as we scroll through our invoices, and you can see we're not in administrative mode, this is user mode. As we scroll through the invoices, the line items, the child records for the parent table, the invoice table, appear automatically. This appearance is based on the fact that the line items table is a child table to the invoice itself. We see that by looking at the child table in administrative mode, looking at the outgoing link from the line items table to the invoice parent, and noting the composition is set to yes. This defines it as a child table, a table that is embedded within the invoice stack. We see 4 stacks on the screen. 3 stacks have no children. The invoice stack, or the invoice family, has the 1 line item subtable. And that is how we can use subtables or child tables, and more specifically, any invisible table, to be the data source when we want to interrogate or analyze specific pieces of content. We can hide the table for purposes of runtime. So we hide the line items to prevent the user from doing direct data entry. We force them to go through the invoice table to create the line item, but we do not restrict the line item table to being viewable parent only. We have our views in the dashboard, which allow us to see either all of the line items or some subset, some array of line items based on the parameters we have set here. This was a quick class, but it's an important topic. Hiding tables is a very powerful tool in our toolkit for building security protocols. A table that is hidden, a table that can't be seen, can't be accessed. So being able to hide crucial tables, being able to hide specific tables from specific users or groups of users or user roles, that's a very important function. But in that function, hiding tables, we're giving up some other functionality in a different area. The ability to click on that table here in our sidebar or here on our desktop and immediately see the contents. We're also unable to see the child content without first specifying the parent. Well, the view changes all of that. So a quick class today, but an important class today. Go ahead and download the template, Child Tables and Views, from the Ninox member portal. You can replay this video by returning to the beginning, and you can pause it, and you can experiment, and you can see all of the code behind all of the selections and all of the visibility formulas. And of course, you can come back anytime you like to enjoy all of the videos in our Ninox training series. That's going to be it for today. I hope you'll join us in our next class next week when we have a very special training class coming up. We will be exploring the new Ninox calendar, Ninox Calendar Plus, next week here at the Ninox Learning Channel. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for being part of the global Ninox community, and thank you especially for supporting what we do here at Nioxis Corporation. Go out and build some cool databases, and I look forward to seeing you in the classroom next week for the very special edition of the Ninox Learning when we look at our new calendar system, Calendar Plus for Ninox. Bye-bye, everybody.